Kingston thought it done. Story finished. But real danger don't show itself early.
Everyone in Kingston envied his life, but no one knew the woman quietly controlling it. Kingston, Jamaica woke slowly that morning, as if the city itself understood that something big was about to happen. The early sun stretched across the skyline, painting the glass buildings of New Kingston in gold. The streets were already alive, vendors calling out, taxis honking impatiently, the scent of fried dumplings and coffee drifting through the humid air. But above all that noise, above the daily hustle, there was one name moving through conversations like electricity. Daniel Clark. Yow, you hear say Clark about fi close dat big deal? 10 billion dem say. Billion, you know. Man, I go run Jamaica soon. Daniel Clark was no ordinary man. At just 38, he had built a reputation that most men spent lifetimes chasing. Sharp suits, sharper mind, and a presence that commanded attention the moment he entered any room. He wasn't born into wealth, but he had fought his way into it, climbed every ladder, crushed every doubt, and now stood at the very top of Kingston's corporate world. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Because what no one saw, what no one even imagined, was that Daniel Clark's life was not entirely his own. And the quiet woman in his house, the one everyone ignored, was the reason why. That morning, Daniel stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie with precision. His reflection stared back at him, confident, composed, unstoppable. He smiled slightly. "Today a D-Day," he muttered under his breath. Behind him, the house moved quietly. Soft footsteps, the clink of a cup, the low hum of a kettle finishing its boil. Marcia. She had been awake long before him. She always was. In the kitchen, she moved with calm, deliberate rhythm, pouring coffee, plating breakfast, arranging everything exactly the way Daniel liked it. Not because he appreciated it, but because she had learned that routine kept peace, or at least, it kept things predictable. Marcia Clark did not look like the wife of a man about to close a $10 billion deal. No designer clothes, no flashy jewelry, no loud personality demanding attention. She dressed simply, spoke softly, kept to herself. To outsiders, she was invisible. To Daniel, she was even less. "Marcia!" Daniel's voice cut through the house. She didn't rush. She never rushed. She simply picked up the tray and walked toward the dining area. "Yes?" she said calmly. Daniel didn't even look at her at first. "Me shirt. Ya iron it?" "It's in your closet. The blue one you asked for." He nodded slightly, still focused on his phone. "Good." That was all. No thank you. No eye contact, just expectation. Marcia placed the breakfast in front of him and stepped back slightly, her hands resting lightly against each other. Watching. Always watching. Daniel scrolled through messages rapidly. Investors, lawyers, international partners. All eyes were on him. All pressure sat on his shoulders, and he loved it. "Today everything lock in," he said confidently. "Once dis sign, it done." Marcia tilted her head slightly. "Everything?" she asked softly. Daniel finally looked at her. For a moment, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Then he smirked. "You wouldn't understand." And just like that, the moment disappeared. But Marcia's eyes didn't change. They stayed calm. Too calm. Outside, a black luxury vehicle pulled up to the gate. Daniel stood, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. "Me late," Marcia nodded. "Drive safe." He paused for half a second, then walked out without another word. The door closed behind him, and the house fell silent. For a long moment, Marcia didn't move. Then slowly, she turned, walked back to the table, and sat down. The untouched cup of coffee sat across from her, still warm. She reached out, but didn't drink. Instead, she stared at it, thinking, calculating, remembering. Across the city, Daniel's car weaved through traffic with purpose. His phone buzzed constantly. Yes, confirmed at. Yes, me reaching soon. No delays, none. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to go his way, because this deal was not just about money. It was about power, legacy, control. What he didn't know was that control was already slipping through his fingers. Back at the house, Marcia finally lifted the cup of coffee, but instead of drinking it, she stood, walked to the sink, and slowly poured it out. The steam rose, then disappeared, just like the illusion Daniel believed in. She dried her hands, then walked quietly down the hallway, into a room Daniel never entered. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in the story, the real Marcia began to emerge. Inside the room, everything was different. Multiple screens, encrypted devices, documents organized with surgical precision. This was not a housewife's space. This was a command center. Marcia stepped forward. Her posture changed. Her expression sharpened. Her silence became authority. She picked up a secure phone, pressed one button. A voice answered immediately. Good morning, ma'am. She didn't smile. Status? Everything is proceeding as scheduled. Mr. Clark is on track. Marcia looked at one of the screens. A live feed. Daniel's car, moving through Kingston, right where she expected him to be, right when she expected him to be there. She nodded slightly. Maintain observation. Yes, ma'am. The call ended. Marcia stood there, watching. Not as a wife, but as something else entirely, something far more powerful. And as the sun rose higher over Kingston, one truth remained hidden beneath the surface of everything. Daniel Clark believed he was building a future, but in reality, he was walking step by step through a plan that was never his. The entire city saw her as a quiet, ordinary wife, but silence is dangerous when it is hiding power. Kingston was fully awake now. The city moved with its usual mixture of beauty and pressure, morning traffic rolling like a restless river, car horns cutting through the heat, office workers hurrying through New Kingston with coffee in hand, vendors calling out from sidewalks, and the heavy air carrying the smell of patties, diesel, and rain that had not yet fallen. It was the kind of morning that made a man feel alive if he believed the world was opening for him. Daniel Clark believed exactly that. By the time his black SUV turned into the underground parking lot of the glass tower, where his company occupied 3 polished floors, he already felt 10 feet taller than the rest of the city. He stepped out in an expensive suit, one hand adjusting his cuff, the other holding his phone, answering messages before the driver had even shut the door. Tell legal I want revised figures before 11. He didn't slow down. And no excuses from the European side today. None. If they want in, them follow my pace. He ended the call before the voice on the other end could finish speaking. That was Daniel's style. Fast, hard, controlling. People admired it when it produced results. They feared it when it turned on them. And today, as employees stepped aside to make room for him in the elevator lobby, their faces carried the same expression people in Kingston often wore around power: respect mixed with calculation. Everybody wanted to be close to the man they believed was about to close the biggest merger deal Jamaica had seen in years. Everybody wanted the light that seemed to shine around him. Nobody noticed the shadow moving quietly behind that light. At home, Marcia stood at the kitchen sink with both hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter. The house had become still after Daniel left, but it was not peaceful stillness. It was the kind of silence that follows a performance once the audience is gone, the kind that lets the truth breathe. The cup he had not touched was gone. The breakfast plate was cleared. The table was wiped clean. No sign remained of the morning ritual that would repeat itself tomorrow exactly as it had repeated itself yesterday. To anyone looking in from outside, Marcia Clark would appear like many women in Kingston whose labor kept homes standing while the men inside them claimed importance. She did not wear bold makeup. She did not fill rooms with laughter. She did not post her life. She did not fight for visibility. She did not announce herself. And because of that, nearly everybody made the same mistake. They believed her silence meant she was small. But silence and smallness are not the same thing. Marcia lifted her eyes slowly toward the window above the sink. The sunlight touched one side of her face, but her expression remained unreadable. Not cold, not broken, not even sad, measured, as if emotion itself had been taught to wait its turn. She turned from the sink and walked through the house with the unhurried calm of someone who had long ago learned that the people who move most quietly often see the most. Every detail remained in place. Curtains tied back, sofa pillows aligned, Daniel's study door closed. The polished floors reflected the light. Everything looked clean, expensive, controlled. But Marcia was not admiring the house. She was listening to it. Listening for absence. Listening for certainty. Listening for the moment when the performance of marriage fully left the walls. Only then did she move down the corridor toward the locked room at the far end. Daniel had passed that door hundreds of times. He had never once asked for the key. That said more about him than he realized. He had looked at his wife for years and still never believed there was anything behind the quiet. Marcia unlocked the door. Inside, the air felt cooler. Different. The room carried no softness, no decorative warmth, no trace of domestic life. It was precise. 3 large monitors glowed softly against a dark wall. A clean desk sat beneath them, holding 2 secure phones, 1 slim tablet, a leather notebook, and a closed folder with no label. Another wall held discreet filing cabinets. On a side table rested a small coffee press, untouched. Everything in the room suggested planning, surveillance, and disciplined patience. This was not the hidden hobby of a bored wife. This was operational. Marcia stepped in and closed the door behind her. In that instant, her posture changed almost imperceptibly. The softness people projected onto her dissolved. Her back straightened. Her eyes sharpened. Her movements became deliberate in a different way, less domestic, more executive. She pressed a button on one of the phones. The call connected immediately. "Good morning, ma'am." The voice was male, professional, alert. "Report." Her tone was low and steady. No trace of the woman who had just served breakfast. "Mr. Clark arrived at headquarters 6 minutes ago. Floor movement is normal. Investor liaison team is in position. Draft package version C is waiting for your review. We are tracking communication from Zurich, Toronto, and Panama." Marcia's gaze settled on the center monitor. A dashboard displayed timestamps, meeting schedules, transport movements, and secure communication channels. One small live tile showed Daniel entering a boardroom, surrounded by men in suits who believed they were walking with the most important person in the building. Her eyes did not linger on him emotionally. They assessed him. "What about the delay request?" she asked. "Denied, as instructed." "And the minister's office?" "They called twice this morning. They're anxious. They believe Mr. Clark still controls final approval." For the first time, something close to irony touched Marcia's face. Not a smile, something quieter. "Let them believe it for now." "Yes, ma'am." The line paused. Then the man added carefully, "There is also the matter of his behavior at home." Marcia said nothing. Silence stretched across the call. Even over the line, it carried weight. "We received the domestic security summary from last night," the man continued. Raised voice, aggressive language, pattern escalation confirmed. Marcia's eyes lowered briefly to the closed folder on the desk. She opened it. Inside were dated notes, short entries, objective language, no dramatic adjectives, no emotional storytelling, just patterns, verbal degradation increasing, control behavior around household routines, financial condescension, public dismissal in front of guests, late-night agitation linked to deal stress, escalation probability, moderate to high. She turned one page, a photograph, not of bruises, not of injuries, just of a dining table after a late dinner, one broken glass on the floor, wine spreading across tile like blood. She closed the folder. "Continue observation," she said. "Yes, ma'am." The line ended. Marcia remained still for a moment, one hand resting lightly on the desk. A lesser person might have cried in that room, might have broken, might have asked how a woman could build systems powerful enough to move international money, influence ministers, and orchestrate billion-dollar corporate structures while still standing in her own kitchen being spoken to like a servant. But Marcia was not a lesser person. She understood something most people never learn until far too late. Power does not always arrive wearing noise. Sometimes it folds laundry. Sometimes it sets a breakfast tray down without trembling. Sometimes it waits. Across the city, Daniel entered the main conference room and found half the room already standing before he reached the head of the table. He enjoyed moments like this. The polished wood table, the wall-sized screen, the bottled water lined neatly beside notepads no one would really use. The low murmur cutting off the moment he stepped in. It all confirmed the story he told himself, that he mattered more than other men, that the city moved because he pushed it, that the deal existed because of his brilliance. "Morning, everyone," he said, though it was not said warmly. It was a declaration. Several greeted him quickly. A few tried to read his mood. One junior analyst straightened so suddenly he nearly knocked over a pen. Daniel took his seat and looked around the table. There was Andrea, head of communications, sharp-eyed and careful. There was Peter from legal, tired already and trying not to show it. There was Horace from regulatory affairs, a man old enough to know that deals of this size rarely belonged to the faces presenting them. There were 2 bankers dialing in virtually. There were foreign advisors. There were local partners. There was ambition in the room, greed in the room, fear in the room. And Daniel mistook all of it for loyalty. "Let's move," he said. "I don't want long speeches. I want problems and solutions." That was how the meeting began. Fast, clipped, tense. A review of projected employment numbers, a dispute about land concessions near the port, a concern over one private equity partner requesting an additional risk carve-out. Regulatory timing, currency exposure, political optics, media strategy. Daniel attacked every issue the same way. Dominance first, nuance later, if nuance was needed at all. "No, cut it. Push back. Tell them that won't happen. We're not here to beg anybody." At one point, Peter from legal raised a concern about disclosure requirements on one of the offshore holding entities involved in the structure. Daniel didn't even let him finish. "Peter, me new pay you fee come tell me what xian work. Tell me how fi make it work." The room laughed politely, because that is what rooms like that do when power humiliates someone they are glad not to be. Peter forced a smile, but Horace noticed something else. The disclosure issue mattered, more than Daniel was allowing. Horace leaned back slowly, studying him. Not for the first time, the older man wondered whether Daniel really understood the full architecture of the merger at all. He spoke confidently. Yes. He controlled meetings. Yes. He had become the public face everyone associated with the transaction. Yes. But understanding the machine and standing in front of the machine are 2 different things. Horace knew enough to suspect Daniel was standing in front of something much larger than himself. He just did not yet know who was truly behind it. Back at the house, Marcia changed clothes, not into luxury, into simplicity of another kind. A tailored blouse, dark skirt, small earrings, no wasted detail. She tied her hair back neatly and looked in the mirror without vanity. She was not dressing to be admired. She was dressing to move through spaces unnoticed by people who only respect what is loud. Before leaving, she paused in the foyer. Her gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the console table. Daniel in a tuxedo, her in a soft cream dress, both smiling for the camera on a night when the city called them beautiful. Anyone seeing the photo would think they understood the marriage. They would be wrong. Marcia picked up the frame, not lovingly, not bitterly, just thoughtfully. Then she set it back down exactly where it had been. A symbol restored to its position, an illusion put back on display. When she stepped outside, the driver waiting by the gate straightened at once. "Morning, Mrs. Clark." She gave a small nod. "Morning, Noel." Unlike Daniel, she used names. Unlike Daniel, she noticed who worked around her. That was one reason people underestimated her, and also one reason the right people were fiercely loyal to her. Noel opened the rear door, but Marcia did not get in immediately. She looked down the quiet residential street first. A woman jogging, a gardener across the road, a fruit vendor pushing a cart at the corner. Normal life. Then she entered the car. "Downtown first," she said. Noel nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The vehicle moved off. Kingston unfolded around them in layers, from wealth to strain, from painted walls and guarded gates to crowded intersections and old buildings stained by time. Downtown held a different pulse from New Kingston, harder, older, closer to the bones of the city. Here, power did not only wear cufflinks. It wore uniforms, old favors, cash deals, inherited influence, whispered names. Marcia watched the city through the tinted glass without losing herself in it. She had known every version of Kingston, the polished one, the hungry one, the corrupt one, the hopeful one, the one that smiles in public and negotiates in back rooms. It had taught her well. Her phone vibrated once, a secure message, board contact confirmed. Window available, 12:40 p.m. She typed a short reply. Keep route clear, no direct contact with Clark. Then she put the phone away. No panic, no excitement, just timing. At Clark Strategic Holdings, Daniel's meeting ran long, and his mood worsened with every complication that threatened the clean victory he had promised the world. By noon, he had already snapped at 3 people, ignored 2 recommendations that might later matter, and approved a communications line he had not actually read. He demanded certainty from a transaction built on delicate layers he did not fully control. That was the beginning of his danger. Arrogance loves partial knowledge. It mistakes access for ownership. During a break, Andrea caught up with him near the glass wall outside the conference room. "You need to slow down with legal," she said quietly. "Peter's concern isn't small." Daniel barely glanced at her. "Everybody always nervous when money this size moving." "That's not what I said." He turned then, slightly annoyed. "Andrea, listen to me. This deal happening. Nobody nah stop it. Nobody." She held his gaze. Andrea had worked around men like Daniel long enough to know the point where confidence begins to rot into blindness. "You're acting like every lever is in your hand," she said. He smiled thinly. "Because it is." Andrea almost responded. Almost. Then she chose silence instead. Not because she agreed, because something in Daniel's certainty had started to look unstable. As she walked away, he looked back through the glass at the city skyline and saw himself reflected over it. Clean, successful, rising. He liked that image. He had no idea how false it was. At 12:37 p.m., Marcia entered a private office suite in a building downtown that had no name on the main directory. The receptionist did not ask questions. The security officer opened the inner door before she reached it. 2 men in suits were already standing when she entered the conference room. One was Jamaican, late 50s, with the composed face of someone long accustomed to institutional influence. The other was foreign, silver-haired, precise, the kind of executive who spoke rarely because rooms rearranged themselves when he did. Both acknowledged her immediately. "Good afternoon, Ms. Bennett," said the Jamaican man. That was not the name Daniel's wife used at home. Marcia took her seat. "Gentlemen," the foreign executive slid a folder across the table. "We reviewed the latest movement. Clark is becoming more aggressive in tone." "Noted," Marcia said. "The board is asking again whether he understands the full structure." Marcia opened the folder without hurry. "He understands only what he was meant to understand." The room went quiet. There it was. Not the full truth, but enough of it. The Jamaican executive folded his hands. "And if he reaches beyond that?" Marcia looked up. "Then the structure will remind him where he stands." No one smiled. This was not theater. This was governance. They moved through timelines, approvals, strategic sequencing, political risk containment, and exit protocols. The language was exact. The stakes were enormous. At no point did anyone speak to Marcia as if she were an accessory to the process. She directed, she clarified, she approved. And though the men at the table carried decades of power between them, neither mistook who had final authority. When the meeting ended, the Jamaican executive hesitated slightly. There is also the domestic concern. Marcia stood, gathering her documents. Yes, we can intervene. She held his gaze for a beat. Not yet. He nodded once. That answer was accepted not because it was easy, but because it came from her. Outside again, Kingston looked unchanged. Minibuses still raced foolishly through traffic. Men still argued near shop fronts. Schoolchildren still moved in noisy groups. Vendors still sold coconut water in the heat. Life continued without pausing for the hidden architecture of wealth, pain, or revenge. But under that ordinary afternoon, pressure was growing. The kind of pressure that changes lives before anyone hears the crack. By late afternoon, Daniel finally returned home, carrying the anger of an incomplete day like a storm inside his shoulders. He dropped his keys too hard on the entry table and loosened his tie with irritation. "Marcia!" She appeared from the kitchen almost immediately. Not flustered, not timid, present. "Yes? Why the food not ready yet?" It was not late. Dinner was not due. But the question was not about food. It was about control finding the nearest safe target. "It will be ready in 20 minutes, she said. Daniel exhaled sharply and threw himself onto the sofa. "Every day me have enough madness outside. Me shouldn't Hafi come home to more delay." Marcia said nothing. He looked up at her then, annoyance turning sharper because her calm did not feed his temper the way fear would have. "You hearing me?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Then say something." She met his eyes. "What would you like me to say?" That question should have ended the moment. Instead, it unsettled him. There was no challenge in her tone, no raised voice, no disrespect. Yet something about her stillness made him feel, though he would never have admitted it, not fully in control. He looked away first. "Just sort it out," he muttered. Marcia returned to the kitchen. The pot simmered steadily on the stove. She lifted the lid, stirred once, and lowered the flame. Her face remained calm, but inside her mind, files were opening and closing in ordered sequence. His pattern is increasing. His confidence is peaking. His blindness is becoming useful. Useful. That word might sound cruel to a softer listener, but Marcia had stopped measuring reality by softness a long time ago. She knew where weakness invites damage. She knew where delay protects survival. She knew that some men become most dangerous at the exact moment they believe themselves untouchable. And Daniel Clark was moving toward that moment. During dinner, he barely tasted the food. He talked instead about projections, ministers, foreign capital, market dominance, headlines. He spoke as if narrating his own ascent for an invisible audience. Marcia listened, asking only small questions now and then. Not naive questions, strategic ones. Will the approvals all come from one side? No, but them align. And if they don't? He frowned. Why you always sound like yo looking for problem? I asked a question. He shook his head dismissively. You wouldn't get it. This level different. Marcia lowered her eyes to her plate. Different. Yes, very different. Because Daniel still believed complexity belonged to him simply because he stood where cameras could see him. He never considered that the deepest power in any room may be the one no camera is invited to film. That night, after he fell asleep, Marcia remained awake. The bedroom was dark, except for a thin blade of streetlight slipping through the curtains. Daniel slept heavily, one arm thrown carelessly over the sheet, breathing with the entitled ease of a man who had never once imagined his wife possessed a world beyond his line of sight. Marcia sat upright beside him for a long moment, not looking at him with love, not looking at him with hate, looking at him with the sad clarity reserved for people who have finally been measured and understood. Then she stood and left the room without sound. In the hidden office, the monitors waited. A message had arrived. subject confidence level increasing. External pressure likely to trigger domestic spillover within 72 hours. Marcia read it once, then again. Her fingers rested above the keyboard. For the first time all day, something moved beneath her calm. Not fear, not hesitation, grief, but even grief in her had discipline. She typed a reply. Maintain protocol, increase internal readiness. No visible intervention unless threshold is crossed. She sent it, then leaned back and closed her eyes briefly. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. A siren rose and faded. The city kept breathing. Marcia opened her eyes and looked at Daniel's movement log on one of the screens, then at the merger architecture on another, then at the domestic incident file closed at the edge of the desk. 3 worlds: marriage, empire, damage. And she was standing at the center of all 3. The quiet wife, the unseen architect, the woman everyone underestimated. By morning, Daniel would wake again believing he was the most important force in his own story. And Marcia would make his breakfast again. Because sometimes the most powerful hand in a kingdom is the one nobody notices setting the table. But not for much longer. In Kingston's world of power, deals aren't won by intelligence alone. They're controlled by forces no one dares to name. By midday, Kingston was no longer waking. It was burning. The sun pressed hard against the glass towers of New Kingston, turning every reflective surface into a blinding mirror. Heat rose from the pavement in waves, and inside the corporate buildings, tension climbed just as fast. This was where real power lived, not in the streets, not in the noise, but in quiet rooms where decisions were made that could shift millions, sometimes billions, without a single public announcement. And today, all roads pointed to one thing: the $10 billion merger. Daniel Clark sat at the head of the long conference table again, but this time the energy in the room had changed. It was tighter, sharper, less forgiving. The earlier confidence had started to thin out, replaced by something more dangerous: pressure. "Walk me through it again," Daniel said, leaning forward slightly, fingers pressed together. One of the foreign advisors cleared his throat. "There are concerns from the Zurich side. They're requesting an additional layer of review before final commitment." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Review? After everything already sign off?" "They're saying new information has surfaced." That word, information, hung in the room longer than it should have. Daniel leaned back slowly. "From where?" No one answered immediately. That silence was not accidental. It was cautious, because in deals of this size, information did not simply appear. It was released, controlled, timed, and whoever controlled it, controlled everything. Across town, in another building far less visible, 2 men sat in a dim office overlooking Harbor Street. One of them spoke quietly. "Clark moving too fast." The other nodded. "He thinks he's leading." A small pause. Then, "Should we slow him?" The first man leaned back. "No, not yet." He looked at a file on the desk. No name on the outside, but inside, everything was connected. "Let him build confidence first," he added. "It makes the fall cleaner." Back in the boardroom, Daniel stood now, pacing slowly. "I don't want hesitation," he said. "We've come too far for people to start getting nervous now." Andrea watched him carefully. "You're not hearing what they're saying," she said. "This isn't nerves. Something changed." Daniel stopped, turned. "And I'm telling you, nothing changed that we can't handle." His voice carried authority. But underneath it, something else had started to form. Defensiveness. That was new. The screen at the front of the room flickered as new data came in. A delay, minor but visible, then another. Emails unanswered, calls postponed, approvals pending. Individually, none of it meant failure. Together, it meant resistance. Invisible resistance. Daniel felt it now, not clearly, but enough to irritate him. "Push them," he said sharply. "Everybody! I want responses before end of day." No one moved immediately. That hesitation, small but real, did not go unnoticed. Power was beginning to shift, and Daniel didn't yet understand why. Miles away, Marcia sat in her vehicle, parked just outside a government complex. She wasn't looking at the building. She was looking at her phone, watching the delays come in, exactly as expected. Not chaos, not failure, control. She sent one short message. Maintain pressure, no escalation yet. Then she locked the screen. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass, calm, focused, unshaken. Back in the office, Daniel slammed his hand lightly against the table. Why everything slowing down? No one answered quickly enough, and that was the problem. For the first time since morning, Daniel Clark did not feel in control. Not fully, not clearly, just enough uncertainty to unsettle him. Outside, Kingston continued as if nothing had changed. Cars moved, people laughed, business carried on. But beneath that normal rhythm, the temperature was rising, and Daniel Clark was standing right in the center of it, feeling the heat, but still unaware of where the fire was really coming from. The deal was starting to shake in the boardroom, but the real damage was building where no one was watching, inside his own house. Evening came slowly over Kingston, but the heat did not leave. It clung to the walls, to the roads, to the glass towers that had absorbed the sun all day and now radiated it back into the city like a quiet warning. Traffic crawled, horns echoed, voices rose in impatience. Somewhere, music played too loud. Somewhere else, arguments grew sharp and fast. Pressure was everywhere, and Daniel Clark carried that pressure home with him like a storm he refused to release. The black SUV pulled into the driveway harder than usual, tires crunching against the gravel with unnecessary force. The gate slid shut behind him, sealing the house off from the rest of Kingston, but not from what he had brought inside. He stepped out without waiting for the driver to open the door. His jaw was tight. His phone was still in his hand, and his mind was still inside the boardroom. "Why'd 'em slowing things now?" he muttered to himself. "After everything lock in?" He walked straight inside. No greeting, no pause, just momentum. "Marcia!" The name echoed through the house. In the kitchen, Marcia did not flinch. She had heard the tone before he even spoke. She had felt the shift in energy the moment the car entered the driveway. She turned off the stove calmly, wiped her hands, and stepped out into the hallway. "Yes?" Daniel was already loosening his tie, pacing slightly, irritation rolling off him like heat. "What going on with dinner?" "It's almost ready." He exhaled sharply. "Almost ready. Every day is almost ready." The words weren't really about food. They were about control slipping, somewhere else, and needing somewhere safe to land. Marcia watched him, not defensively, not emotionally, observing. "You're home earlier than expected," she said quietly. He stopped pacing, turned. "And that a problem?" "No." "Then don't sound like it." Her expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. Small, subtle, dangerous. Daniel dropped onto the sofa, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. He ran a hand over his face. For a moment, just a moment, the confidence cracked. "What you know about deals at this level?" he said suddenly, without looking at her. Marcia didn't answer immediately. He continued. "Everybody's smiling in a ya face, but behind it, everybody a try pull something, nobody clean." There was frustration in his voice now, real frustration, but instead of sharing it honestly, he hardened it. "And then when things slow down, everybody start act like is you problem." Marcia stepped closer. "Is it slowing down?" That question landed heavier than he expected. He looked up. For a split second, suspicion flickered. "How you mean? You said things are slowing down." "I never say that. You just did." Silence. Then irritation returned. "Ya always listening too much," he snapped. "And you always talking like you know more than you should." Marcia held his gaze, not challenging, not backing down, just present. And that presence unsettled him again. He stood abruptly. "Just make the food," he said. "Me tired." She nodded once and returned to the kitchen. Behind her, Daniel exhaled again, but this time it came out heavier. He didn't like this feeling, this lack of control, this quiet resistance he couldn't fully define, not in the office, not at home. Dinner was set 10 minutes later. Everything in place, everything precise, just the way he expected. But tonight, something felt different. Not in the food, not in the room, in the space between them. Daniel sat down, picked up his fork, took a bite, barely tasted it. "You know what the problem is?" he said suddenly. Marcia looked up. "No. People don't understand pressure." He pointed lightly at the table. "They see the result, but they don't see what it takes to get there." Marcia said nothing. He continued. "Everybody want the success, but nobody want the weight. And when you carrying it..." He paused, then shook his head. "Never mind. You wouldn't understand." There it was again. That dismissal, that blind certainty, that assumption. Marcia lowered her eyes briefly, then asked softly, "Are you sure about that?" Daniel looked at her, really looked this time, something in her tone, something in her stillness. Didn't match the version of her he had built in his mind, but instead of questioning it, he rejected it. "Don't start," he said. "Me not in the mood." The rest of dinner passed in fragments, short sentences, long silences, unfinished thoughts. Daniel spoke more than he listened. Marcia listened more than she spoke, but every word he said, every reaction, every shift in tone, was being recorded somewhere far deeper than memory. Later that night, the house quieted again. Daniel fell asleep quickly. Too quickly, the kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion, not peace. Marcia remained awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at him. Not with anger, not with love, with understanding, and something else. Decision. She stood and walked silently out of the room. The hidden office door opened, closed. The screens lit her face softly. A new update blinked onto the main display. Internal resistance increasing, subject instability rising, probability of escalation high. Marcia read it once, then again. Her hand rested lightly on the desk, still steady, still controlled, but beneath that control, something was shifting. Not doubt, not fear. Timing. She opened the domestic file again, flipped through entries, stopped at the most recent. Today's date, no entry yet. She picked up a pen, paused, then wrote one line. Escalation entering final phase. She closed the file. Across Kingston, in offices and quiet rooms and unseen networks, other pieces were moving too. Calls being made, approvals being delayed, decisions being redirected, not chaos, control, and all of it. Connected. Back in the house, Daniel shifted slightly in his sleep. Unaware, unprotected, still believing he was the one in control of everything around him. Marcia turned off the screen. The room went dark. She stood there for a moment longer, then walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. In the darkness of the hallway, one truth settled into place like something inevitable. The cracks were no longer small, they were spreading, through the deal, through the marriage, through Daniel himself. And when cracks spread far enough, collapse is not a possibility. It is a matter of time. He thought the pressure was coming from competitors, but the truth was far worse. Every move he made was already being watched, measured, and controlled. Night in Kingston did not bring peace. It brought a different kind of life, a quieter one, a more dangerous one, the kind that moved without noise, without headlines, without attention, but with power that could shift entire industries without ever stepping into the light. And Daniel Clark was now moving directly inside it. The next morning came too fast for him. His sleep had been heavy, but not restful. Dreams blurred into tension, voices without faces, meetings that never ended, questions he couldn't answer. And when he opened his eyes, the weight returned instantly. The deal, the delays, the silence from people who were never silent before. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. Something wasn't right. He couldn't explain it yet, but he could feel it. Beside him, the bed was already empty. Marcia had been up for hours. Downstairs, everything looked normal. Breakfast prepared, coffee poured, table set perfectly, just like every other day. But Daniel didn't sit immediately this time. He stood there for a moment, looking at her. Really looking, as if trying to see something he had never tried to see before. Marcia didn't react. "Morning," she said calmly. He nodded slightly. "Morning." A pause. Then, "You up early?" "I always am." Another pause. Then he sat. Something had shifted. Small, but real. He picked up his phone, immediately. Emails, messages, missed calls, more delays, more pending responses. More silence. His jaw tightened again. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Marcia watched him. "You're still waiting?" He looked up quickly. "What you mean, still waiting?" "You said yesterday things were slowing down." He stared at her. There it was again. That tone, not questioning, not emotional. Knowing. He didn't like that. "Me handle it," he said shortly. "I didn't say you weren't." Silence. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Across the city, far from the Clark residence, a network was already awake. Phones ringing quietly, emails being redirected, meetings being rescheduled, approvals being paused, not denied, not rejected, just held, suspended in a space where time itself became pressure. And at the center of that network, Marcia. Inside her hidden office, the screens glowed brighter than usual. Multiple windows open, multiple conversations running, multiple layers of control moving at once. She stepped in, closed the door, and immediately began working. Her hands moved quickly now. No hesitation, no uncertainty, only precision. A call connected. "Yes, ma'am. Update. Zurich has delayed again. Toronto is holding position. Panama is waiting for instruction. Internal pressure increasing across all channels." "Good." No emotion. Just confirmation. She moved to another screen. Daniel's schedule. Meetings stacked. Calls pending. Pressure building. Exactly as expected. "Any deviation?" she asked. "Minor. He's starting to question timing." "Let him." "Yes, ma'am." The call ended. Marcia leaned back slightly. This was the phase she had been preparing for. Not the collapse. Not yet. The pressure before the collapse. The stage where confidence begins to crack. But pride refuses to admit it. She opened another file, a deeper one. Not just business, not just structure. People, names, connections. Every person involved in the deal. Every weakness, every loyalty, every fear. Mapped, organized, controlled. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived at the office more aggressive than ever. He didn't greet anyone, didn't slow down, didn't smile, straight into the boardroom. "Where are we?" he demanded. No introductions, no build-up, just pressure. Andrea answered first. "Still waiting on final confirmations." "From who?" "Multiple sides." He slammed a folder onto the table. "This is nonsense." The room stayed quiet. No one challenged him, but no one agreed either. And that silence was louder than any argument. "Call them," he said. "We have." "Call again." "They're not responding." That sentence landed harder than anything else that morning. Not responding, not pushing back, not negotiating, just not responding. Daniel turned away, walked to the glass wall, looked out over Kingston. The city moved like nothing had changed. But for him, everything was changing. He pulled out his phone, dialed one of his highest-level contacts, straight to voicemail. He tried another. No answer. Another. Declined. Now it wasn't just pressure. It was pattern. Back in the hidden office, Marcia watched the same calls appear in real time. Attempted, blocked, redirected, every move Daniel made, already anticipated, already controlled. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "He's starting to feel it." Hours passed, the days stretched, and the pressure grew heavier. By afternoon, even the junior staff felt it. Something was wrong. No one said it directly, but everyone knew. The deal was no longer moving forward. It was being held in place. Daniel finally snapped. "This doesn't make sense." His voice echoed across the room. "Deals don't just freeze like this." But they do, when someone powerful decides they should. Andrea stepped forward carefully. "Daniel." "What?" "This doesn't feel random." He turned sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, this looks controlled." Silence. That word hit deeper than anything else. Controlled. Daniel laughed, but it wasn't real. By who? No one answered, because no one knew. But someone did. Back at home that evening, Marcia stood once again in the kitchen. Calm, measured, quiet, the same woman Daniel thought he knew. The door opened. He entered. Different this time, not just angry, uneasy. "Marcia," she turned. "Yes?" He hesitated, just for a moment, then, "You ever feel like things happening around you, and you can't see who behind it?" That question changed everything. Marcia held his gaze, longer than usual, then said softly, "Yes." He frowned. "What you mean, yes?" "I mean, I understand that feeling." Her tone was calm, but her words carried weight. Daniel stared at her, trying to read her. For the first time. Actually trying, but he was too late. She turned back to the stove, as if nothing had happened, as if everything was still normal. But nothing was normal anymore. That night, as Kingston settled again into its quiet rhythm, one truth became unavoidable. Daniel Clark was no longer leading the deal. He was reacting to it, and somewhere, someone was watching every move he made. By the time he realized he was being trapped, every exit had already been closed. Kingston did not slow down for anyone, not for pressure, not for power, not for men who believed they controlled everything, and certainly not for Daniel Clark. But as the sun rose over the city that morning, something had shifted permanently, whether Daniel wanted to admit it or not, because this was no longer about a deal going slightly off track. This was something else, something deeper, something deliberate. Daniel arrived at the office earlier than usual. Too early. The kind of early that didn't come from discipline, but from unease. The lobby was nearly empty. The receptionist looked surprised. "Morning, Mr. Clark." He nodded, barely acknowledging her. His mind was already racing. By the time the elevator doors closed, he was staring at his reflection again. But this time, he didn't see confidence. He saw tension. Inside the boardroom, he didn't sit. He stood, waiting, watching the door. One by one, the team entered. Slower than usual, quieter than usual. Something was off, and now everyone felt it. "Update," Daniel said immediately. No greeting, no build-up, just pressure. Andrea spoke first. "Zurich has officially requested a delay." "How long?" "They didn't specify." Daniel's expression hardened. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one they gave." Another voice entered. "Toronto is holding their funds." Daniel turned sharply. "Holding?" "They said they need clarity." "On what?" No answer. Because the truth was, no one really knew. Daniel walked slowly to the table, placed both hands on it, leaning forward. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "This deal is not stopping." His voice was controlled, but underneath it, cracks across the city. Marcia watched everything. Her office was alive with movement, data flowing, calls being routed, decisions being executed. She wasn't reacting. She was orchestrating. "Status," she said. "Pressure holding across all sides. Clark is escalating." "Expected." No deviation. "Good." She moved to another screen, zoomed in on one key node, a critical approval point, the kind that could move everything forward or stop everything instantly. Her finger hovered over the command. Then she pulled back. Not yet. Back in the boardroom, Daniel's voice rose. "This doesn't make sense." Silence. Again. But now it felt different. Heavier. Andrea stepped in. "Daniel, we need to consider the possibility that..." That what? That we're not in full control anymore. That sentence landed like a shockwave. Daniel laughed, but it wasn't real. It was defensive. Who else would be in control? No one answered. Because no one could, but someone was. The day dragged on. Every hour brought more resistance, more silence, more uncertainty, calls unanswered, emails delayed, approvals frozen. Daniel tried everything: pressure, influence, direct contact. Nothing worked. For the first time in years, he was being ignored. That was the moment everything changed. Back at home that evening, the tension followed him again. But this time, it wasn't just anger, it was fear. He entered the house slower, quieter. "Marcia," she turned. "Yes." He hesitated, then asked, "What would you do if everything you built started slipping?" That question carried weight, real weight. Marcia looked at him, calm, steady, then said, "I would ask myself, who really built it?" Silence. Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, "Dinner is ready." He stood there, confused, frustrated, unsettled, because for the first time, he wasn't sure if he understood the person standing in front of him. That night, sleep didn't come easy, and somewhere in the darkness of Kingston, the deal tightened further. Some moments don't look like the end, but they quietly become the point where everything can never go back. Kingston felt different that day, not because anything had visibly changed. The streets were still full, vendors still called out, cars still fought through traffic, the city still moved like it always did, but beneath that movement, something deeper had shifted. A pressure, a quiet tightening, a sense that something was building toward a moment no one could stop. And at the center of it all, Daniel Clark was losing control faster than he realized. The morning didn't start with confidence anymore, it started with urgency. Daniel woke before his alarm, heart slightly racing, mind already active. He reached for his phone immediately. Messages, emails, notifications. Nothing had improved. If anything, it had gotten worse. Zurich. No update. Toronto. Awaiting clarification. Panama. Pending internal review. Same words, different format, same result, no movement. Daniel sat up slowly. Something was wrong. Not just with the deal, with everything. Downstairs, Marcia was already moving through her routine. Calm, measured, unchanged, at least on the surface. But today, even she felt it, the shift, the final approach. Daniel entered the dining area, slower this time, watching her, not dismissing, not ignoring, watching. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He sat, but didn't eat. "You ever feel like something is happening, and you're the only one who doesn't understand it?" Marcia looked at him, really looked, then said quietly, "Yes." That answer stayed in the air longer than it should have. Daniel leaned back, frustrated, confused. "I don't like this," he said. "What?" "This feeling." "What feeling?" He hesitated, then said, "Like I'm not in control." That was the first time he admitted it out loud. Marcia didn't react the way most people would. No reassurance, no concern, just understanding. "Control is not always what we think it is," she said. Daniel frowned. "Why you keep talking like that?" She didn't answer, because the truth was no longer something she could explain to him. It was something he would have to experience. At the office, everything escalated. Daniel didn't wait for updates anymore. He demanded them. "Call them again. Send another message. Escalate it. Push harder." But the harder he pushed, the less response he got. That was the pattern. Pressure met silence. Control met resistance. Authority met something stronger. By midday, the entire office felt it. This was no longer a delay. This was a shutdown in motion. Andrea pulled him aside. "Daniel, we need to talk." "Not now." "Yes, now." He stopped, turned. "What?" She lowered her voice. "This is not normal. I know that." "No, you don't." That caught him off guard. This isn't just resistance, she continued. This is coordination. Silence. Daniel stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying someone is controlling this. There it was again. That word, control. But this time, it landed deeper. Because now, he believed it. Back in the hidden office, Marcia watched everything unfold, every call, every delay, every reaction, Daniel's behavior, escalating, predictable. She leaned forward slightly, eyes focused. Phase shift, she said quietly. A voice responded immediately. Confirm? She didn't hesitate. Confirm. And just like that, everything moved to the next level. Back at the office, Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. Then a voice. Calm, controlled, unfamiliar. You are pushing too hard. Daniel froze. Who is this? No answer. You don't understand the structure you are inside, the voice continued. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? You were never in control. The line went dead. Daniel stood there, still. For the first time, real fear entered the story. That night, everything exploded, not publicly, not dramatically, but internally. Daniel returned home with a different energy, not just frustration, not just pressure, something darker. Marcia, she turned. Yes? He walked toward her, slowly. Who really behind this deal? Silence. Marcia looked at him, longer than ever before, then said, Why are you asking me that? His eyes narrowed. Because something not right. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it. She simply said, You're just starting to see clearly. That answer changed everything. Because now, Daniel knew. Not the truth, but enough. Enough to feel it. Enough to fear it. Enough to realize he was already inside something much bigger than himself. The moment that destroys everything doesn't begin with violence. It begins with pressure that refuses to release. Kingston did not know what was about to happen. The city moved the same way it always did. Alive, loud, unpredictable. Cars flooded Halfway Tree. Vendors shouted over each other. Music poured from passing taxis. Office towers reflected sunlight like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. But inside one house, inside one marriage, inside one man's mind, everything was reaching its limit. Daniel Clark had not slept, not properly, not deeply. Every time his eyes closed, his mind reopened the same questions. Who called him? Who was controlling the deal? Why was everything slipping? And the worst one of all, why did it feel like the answer was right in front of him, but just out of reach? By morning, he was already dressed, already tense, already angry. But underneath that anger, fear had taken root. Downstairs, Marcia stood at the stove. Same routine, same calm, same silence. But today, something inside her had shifted too. She knew this day would come. She had prepared for it. But preparation does not remove weight. Daniel entered. No greeting, no hesitation, just energy. Dark energy. We need to talk. Marcia turned slowly. Yes. That answer irritated him. Too calm, too ready. What is going on? He demanded. She didn't pretend not to understand, but she didn't answer directly either. What do you think is going on? She asked. That question hit him like a challenge. I think somebody interfering with my deal, he snapped. Your deal? 2 words, but they carried weight. Daniel stepped closer. What that's supposed to mean? Marcia held his gaze, calm, unmoving. It means, you're asking the wrong question. That was it. That was the moment. The point where pressure stopped building and started breaking. Daniel's temper snapped. Stop talking like you know something. His voice filled the room. You think this is a joke? You think this is some small thing? Marcia didn't move. I never said that. Then what are you saying? Silence. That silence was the worst thing she could give him, because it gave his anger space to grow. He ran his hand through his head, pacing now. Everything is collapsing, he said. People not answering me, deals freezing, calls coming from nowhere. He stopped, turned to her. And you standing here like everything normal? Marcia stepped forward slightly. Because panic won't fix it. That was the wrong answer. Daniel laughed, but it was sharp. Panic! He stepped closer. Too close. You think this is panic? She didn't step back. I think you're losing control, she said quietly. And just like that, everything exploded. His hand slammed against the counter. The sound echoed through the house. Don't say that! But it was too late. Because it was true. He grabbed the edge of the counter, breathing heavier now. I built this! Marcia didn't respond immediately. Then she said, Did you? That question was the final spark, because now it wasn't just pressure, it wasn't just fear, it was his identity being challenged. Watch how you talk to me, he warned, but his voice was no longer fully in control. Marcia saw it, the shift, the breaking point, and for the first time, she hesitated, not out of fear, but out of realization. This moment could not be undone. But Daniel wasn't thinking about consequences anymore. He was reacting. Everything I worked for, everything I built. His voice cracked slightly. And now, it's slipping, and you standing here questioning me? Marcia spoke softly. I'm not questioning you. He stepped closer again. Then what are you doing? She looked directly into his eyes. Telling you the truth. And that was the moment everything crossed the line. Some actions happen in seconds, but the consequences echo for the rest of a lifetime. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not restful quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks. Daniel stood in the kitchen, breathing heavy, the argument from moments before still hanging in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Marcia stood across from him, still, calm, watching him, not with fear, but with clarity. And that clarity made everything worse. You think you know everything, Daniel said, his voice low now but dangerous. Marcia didn't respond immediately. I don't think that, she said finally. Then why you keep talking like you do? Because you're finally asking the right questions. That answer didn't calm him. It ignited him. What questions? He snapped. About control. The word again. Control. It followed him everywhere now. You keep saying that like it means something, he said. It does, she replied. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Daniel turned away, ran his hand through his head, trying to think, trying to breathe, trying to hold on to something that still felt stable. But nothing did. Everything's slipping, he muttered. Everything. Then he turned back to her. And you standing here like it doesn't matter. Marcia stepped forward slightly. It matters, she said. Then act like it. I am. That calm response, that refusal to match his energy, that quiet control, broke something inside him. You think you better than me? He said. No. You think you smarter than me? No. Then why you talking like you above me? She didn't answer. Because the truth was not something he was ready to hear, and that silence was louder than anything she could have said. Daniel's eyes shifted, from her face, to the stove, the kettle, still hot, steam rising slowly, a normal object, in a normal house, but in that moment, nothing was normal. He stepped toward it, not fully thinking, not fully aware, just reacting. Marcia saw the movement. Daniel. But it was too late, because the decision wasn't logical, it wasn't planned, it wasn't even fully conscious. It was emotion, uncontrolled, explosive. He grabbed the kettle, and in one irreversible moment, everything changed. The water left the kettle, time slowed, the sound, the motion, the realization. Marcia didn't scream immediately. For a split second, she just looked at him, not with fear, not with shock, with something else, disappointment. Then the pain hit, and the moment shattered. Daniel froze. The kettle dropped from his hand, clattering loudly against the floor. What did I just... He stepped back, heart racing, breathing broken. This wasn't anger anymore. This was realization. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Marcia steadied herself. No chaos, no panic, just control. Even now. She looked at him again, and that look changed everything. Because now, it wasn't the look of a wife. It was the look of someone who had reached a decision, final, absolute. Daniel felt it. Marcia. But the name sounded different now. Small. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned, walked away, not quickly, not weakly, deliberately. Daniel stood there, frozen, because deep down, he knew whatever came next would not be something he could control. He thought the worst part was what he had done to her, but the true nightmare began when he discovered who she really was. Morning came over Kingston with a cruel kind of beauty. The sky was bright. The city was alive. The streets were already moving. And yet inside Daniel Clark's house, it felt as if light itself had arrived too late. Nothing about the morning felt normal. Not the silence, not the stillness, not the way the walls seemed to hold memory like smoke. The kitchen had been cleaned. The kettle was gone. The floor was spotless. No broken object remained to testify. No visible sign explained the violence of the night before. But the house knew. And Daniel knew. He had not slept. Not for more than a few shattered minutes at a time. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same moment repeating with merciless clarity. The kettle in his hand, the arc of the water, Marcia's face, that unbearable look in her eyes after it happened. Not fear, not panic, not pleading. Decision. That was what haunted him most. Because even in pain, Marcia had looked at him as if something had ended long before the water touched her. As if the act itself had not created the final judgment, but confirmed it. Daniel sat in the living room in yesterday's clothes, one elbow on his knee, his phone in his hand, staring at the screen without really seeing it. He had called her 3 times during the night, then 7 more times before dawn. No answer. He had called a private clinic contact. Nothing useful. He had called one of the men who usually fixed delicate situations quietly. No answer. He had called the driver. The driver claimed not to know where she had gone. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. Daniel no longer knew what truth looked like. His mouth was dry. His thoughts were disordered. But beneath the guilt and panic, one darker realization had started to take shape. Everything that was happening to him now, the silence, the blocked calls, the frozen deal, the strange pressure, the hidden hand moving against him, had not started after the incident. It had already been happening, which meant the incident had not created his downfall. It had accelerated it. And that thought terrified him, because if the damage had begun before last night, then Marcia had been standing at the center of a storm he did not understand. The front gate buzzed. Daniel jolted. He looked toward the window. A black vehicle rolled slowly into the yard, followed by a second one. Not police, not ambulance, not media. Worse, order. The kind of order that arrives without explanation because explanation is no longer considered necessary. Daniel stood quickly. For one wild second, he considered leaving through the back. The thought came and went almost instantly. Run where? From whom? With what power? The first vehicle door opened. 2 men stepped out in dark suits, not flashy, not theatrical, just precise. Behind them came a woman carrying a tablet and a file case. From the second vehicle came an older man Daniel recognized vaguely from finance circles, the sort of man whose name did not appear often in newspapers, but whose approvals could reshape markets. Then the final rear door opened, and Marcia stepped out. Daniel forgot how to breathe. She was dressed in a dark tailored suit, understated and severe, every line of it communicating control. Her hair was pulled back neatly, No softness, no domestic disguise, no trace of the woman who moved quietly through the kitchen making breakfast. One side of her neck and upper shoulder was covered carefully, but not enough to hide everything. There were signs of treatment, signs of injury, signs that the night had happened and would never unhappen. But she did not carry herself like a victim. She walked like authority. And every person around her moved with the subtle deference people reserve for someone whose instructions are obeyed before they are repeated. Daniel stared through the glass. "No," he whispered. Marcia did not rush. She walked to the door and waited. One of the men opened it without knocking. Not out of disrespect for the house, out of certainty about who now controlled the space. Daniel took a step back as they entered. Marcia came in last. She looked at the room once, took in the sleepless disorder of him, and then rested her eyes on his face. No anger, no dramatic hatred. That was worse. "Marcia," her hand lifted slightly, not violently, just enough to stop the word from going further. "We are not doing this here emotionally," she said. Her voice was low and composed. Different. Not because it had changed, but because Daniel was hearing it properly for the first time. One of the men stepped forward and placed a folder on the coffee table. The woman with the tablet remained to the side, already documenting something. The older man stayed near the doorway, silent witness, silent wait. Daniel looked from face to face. "What is this?" Marcia answered him directly. "This is the point where illusions end." He shook his head slowly. No, I need to know what's going on." Marcia's eyes did not leave him. "You needed to know for a very long time. You just never asked the right questions until it was too late." Daniel looked toward the folder. He did not touch it. Something inside him already knew he would not like what lived inside it. "What are you saying?" Marcia gave a small nod to the woman with the tablet. The woman tapped the screen and turned it toward Daniel. A corporate structure appeared, clean, layered, dense, frightening in its complexity. Holding companies, investment vehicles, project entities, regulatory pathways, offshore relationships, board nodes, voting blocks. And at the center of it, not where Daniel expected to see his own name, but where actual control was concentrated, there was one name he had never connected to his wife because he had never bothered to imagine she might carry a life beyond the one he assigned her. Marcia Bennett. Daniel blinked, then blinked again. "No," Marcia said nothing. He looked harder. The structure continued downward into the merger vehicle he had been publicly championing for months. The signature routes, the risk approvals, the capital locks, the strategic holds, the regulatory timing, everything. His throat tightened. No. This time the word sounded smaller. The older man near the door finally spoke. "Mrs. Bennett Clark has served as principal executive controller over the strategic coalition underwriting the merger. Public-facing leadership was always provisional. Internal authority was not." Daniel looked at him like he was speaking another language. Then he looked back at Marcia. "You?" Marcia met his stare. "Yes." The room became unreal. Daniel laughed once, a broken sound with no humor in it. "No, that's not possible." "Why?" she asked. The question was calm, clinical almost, and that made it cut deeper. "Because—" He stopped. Because what? Because he had never seen her in an office? Because she made tea quietly? Because she never performed power in the form he respected? Because he believed silence meant emptiness? Because he was a man who confused visibility with importance? He could not finish the sentence. Marcia finished it for him without mercy. "Because you decided what I was before you ever thought to learn who I am." Daniel looked down, then away, then back at the screen, still hoping reality would rearrange itself. "Why would you—" He swallowed. "Why would you marry me?" That question changed the air. Even the people standing around them seemed to become more still. Marcia answered after a pause. "At the beginning, because I believed you were different from the men who mistake ambition for character." There was no raised tone in her voice, no theatrical speech. That made it land harder. "I saw intelligence in you, drive, hunger. I saw a man who could rise. I thought if you were given room, responsibility, and trust, you might become more disciplined, more humane, more worthy of the future you wanted. Daniel's face tightened. Marcia continued. So I built conditions around you. I opened doors you thought you had forced open alone. I moved conversations before you entered the room. I protected your missteps when they were still small. I redirected people who were willing to let you fail. I let you grow in public while I worked in silence. Each sentence stripped something from him. Pride, identity, story. The deal you called yours, she said, was possible because I permitted you to stand in front of it. Daniel stared at her. His lips parted, but no sound came. Then at last, "You set me up?" "No," Marcia said, "I elevated you." That was worse, because it meant his fall was not the result of conspiracy against a great man. It was the collapse of a man who had been carried further than he ever deserved and still believed he had climbed by himself. He shook his head. No, I worked for this." "You worked," Marcia said. "That is not the same as understanding what held the structure together." Daniel's breathing grew uneven. He looked at the file on the table again, then finally snatched it up and opened it. Inside were documents, internal summaries, board notations, authorization chains, strategic memos, photographs from events he had attended without realizing who else had already shaped the room before he arrived. There were records of approvals linked indirectly to Marcia's network. There were annotated timelines showing exactly when support had been withdrawn in response to Daniel's behavior over the preceding months. And then there was another section, domestic pattern assessment. Daniel's hand stiffened. He flipped one page, then another. Dated observations, incidents, language summaries, escalation tracking, risk thresholds. It was all there, not melodramatic, not inflated, but devastatingly precise. He looked up. "You documented me." Marcia's face did not move. "I measured risk. To me, to the structure, to the people attached to it, and eventually, yes, to myself." He dropped into a chair as though his legs had abandoned him. "So all this time," she said, "I was giving you opportunities to choose differently." The sentence lodged in his chest like a blade. He searched her face for softness, a crack, a memory, some trace of the woman who once might have defended him from the world. There was humanity there, yes, but not softness he could use. "What happens now?" he asked. Marcia looked to the older man. He stepped forward and opened a second folder. "Effective immediately," he said. "You have been removed from all decision-making authority connected to the merger and its related entities. Your access credentials are suspended. Your communications with investors and regulators are to cease. Public statements issued by your office are frozen pending review. Internal investigations regarding conduct, misrepresentation of authority, and reputational exposure are now active." Daniel stared blankly. The older man continued. "In addition, there will be civil and criminal exposure associated with last night's incident depending on medical findings and the course Mrs. Bennett Clark elects to pursue." That sentence finally cut through the business fog and dragged Daniel into the real human horror of what he had done. He looked at Marcia, not as executive now, not as hidden architect, not even as wife, as the person he had injured. "Marcia," his voice cracked. She stopped him again. "No performance." He swallowed. His eyes reddened. "This is not performance." "For years," she said, "you trained yourself to believe that words could repair whatever your behavior destroyed. I am no longer available to that habit." The sentence left no room. Daniel lowered his head. His hands trembled. He thought of dinners, dismissals, the small humiliations he had treated as normal, the way he had spoken over her, through her, around her, the way he had used her silence as proof of inferiority, the way he had come home carrying pressure like entitlement to cruelty. And beneath all of that, the thing now unbearable to him was not only guilt, it was the humiliation of finally seeing that the person he diminished had been the strongest mind in his life the entire time. I didn't know, he said weakly. Marcia's expression shifted for the first time, not into pity, into sadness so brief and restrained it almost disappeared. That, she said, was your decision. He looked up. No. Yes. You hid it. I protected it. There is a difference. And even then you could have known enough about me to speak to me with dignity. My title was never the requirement for your decency. Daniel's eyes closed. That landed deeper than any punishment. Because she was right. Even if Marcia had been nothing more than the role he assigned her, even if she had never touched a boardroom or a finance structure or a single executive decision, nothing would justify what he had done. And now all his excuses were collapsing at once. The woman with the tablet spoke quietly to Marcia, updating her on something. Marcia listened, nodded once, then looked back at Daniel. There will be a statement released later today, she said. It will not mention domestic details, not yet. It will state that leadership oversight has been formally clarified and that transitional authority has been corrected. Daniel's head rose slowly. Clarified? Yes. What does that mean for me publicly? It means, Marcia said, that the city you enjoyed impressing is about to learn you were never what you claimed to be. He inhaled sharply. No. The old fear was back now. Reputation, image, position, name. He had hurt her, yes, but panic still found its way to ego. Marcia saw that too. It disgusted her, though she did not show disgust. So that's it? He asked. You ruin me? The question revealed how little he still understood. Marcia stepped closer. Not enough to comfort, enough to clarify. I did not ruin you, Daniel. I stopped protecting you from what you are when no one is carrying you. Silence. The older man closed the folder. The two suited men stayed still, but their attention remained alert. This room was not only about truth, it was also about containment. Daniel looked toward the doorway as if measuring the possibility of walking out and recovering something elsewhere. Marcia read the thought before he could commit to it. Every major route you think you still have, she said, has already been closed. Your calls will not move what they moved before. Your name will not open what it opened before. The people you relied on have received instruction. Some are protecting themselves already. Some were always loyal elsewhere. To you. Yes. His laugh returned, hollower than before. My God. No, Marcia said. Just structure. It was almost unbearable how calm she remained, but her calm was not cruelty. It was discipline built over years, years of seeing too clearly, years of waiting to learn whether the man beside her would grow into his opportunity or become a danger within it. And now she had her answer. Daniel opened his mouth again, and this time the words that came out were not defensive. I am sorry. The room did not move. I am sorry, he said again, more broken now, for everything, for how I talked to you, for how I treated you, for last night. Marcia, please. She closed her eyes for one brief second, not because the words were meaningless, because they had come too late to change the architecture of consequence. When she opened her eyes, there was no anger in them, only distance. I believe that at this moment you feel sorry, she said. I also believe regret is not the same as transformation. Daniel leaned forward desperately. Tell me what to do. That plea might have moved another person. It did not move Marcia. You are still asking for a path that preserves you, she said. I am no longer designing those. The woman with the tablet stepped in softly. Car is ready. Marcia nodded, then to Daniel. Medical counsel will contact you through representation. Corporate counsel will do the same. You are not to approach me privately. You are not to contact any board member directly. You are not to issue statements, threats, or pleas to the press. The days in which improvisation protected you are over. Daniel stood suddenly. Wait! Everyone in the room became still. Marcia turned back. For the first time since entering, Daniel's face looked truly stripped of everything. Status, arrogance, certainty, posture. Only fear and grief remained. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. The question was not strategic. It was naked, and because it was naked, it was the most dangerous one in the room. Marcia looked at him for a long time, long enough that even the people around them became careful not to breathe too loudly. "Yes," she said at last. The answer devastated him more than if she had said no. "Then how can you do this?" Marcia's voice remained low. "Because love that excuses destruction becomes another form of surrender. And I did enough surrendering to your blindness." She let that settle, then added, "And because loving someone does not require staying beneath what they become." Daniel sank back. Whatever little was left in him seemed to fold inward. Marcia turned and began walking toward the door. The others moved with her. No one rushed. There was no drama to the exit, only completion. But before she crossed the threshold, she stopped. Without turning around, she said, "The merger will close." Daniel looked up. "What?" She turned halfway, just enough for him to see her profile. "It will close, successfully, not because of you, in spite of you." And then she left. The vehicles rolled out of the yard in orderly silence. The gate closed again, and Daniel was alone. For a long time, he did not move. The house felt enormous now, not luxurious, empty, as if every object had withdrawn its willingness to support the story he once told about himself. He looked around the room differently. The framed photos, the furniture, the polished surfaces, the invisible labor, the invisible intelligence, the invisible restraint. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of a woman he had never truly seen. His phone buzzed. He flinched, then looked down. A news alert. Strategic oversight clarified in landmark Kingston merger. Executive Controller Marcia Bennett Clark emerges as principal architect behind 10B Coalition. There were already more coming in. Industry feeds, business circles, messages from people who suddenly sounded formal where they once sounded eager. A board contact requesting all future communication through counsel, a media inquiry, a terse note from Andrea. "I hoped you understood before this. I'm sorry it reached here." He dropped the phone onto the sofa. Outside, Kingston continued like it always did. Minibuses shouted by, vendors sold lunch, clerks carried files, construction continued, men argued, women laughed. The city made room for scandal, power, pain, and reinvention all at once, because that was what cities do. And somewhere above it, in towers he once entered feeling untouchable, rooms were being rearranged around Marcia's authority. Not newly invented authority, revealed authority. Hours later, in a boardroom overlooking the city, Marcia stood at the head of a table Daniel had once imagined belonged to men like him. Her treatment dressings remained discreet beneath tailored fabric. The injury had not vanished. The pain had not vanished. But neither had her control. Around the table sat investors, legal advisors, ministers' representatives, risk analysts, and international partners. No one questioned why she led. No one needed convincing. For many of them, this was not a surprise. It was a correction finally made visible. Marcia reviewed revised approvals, resequenced the regulatory path, issued 3 direct instructions, denied 1 unnecessary concession, and reopened 2 channels Daniel had nearly destroyed by force of ego. The room responded immediately. Not because she was feared alone, because she was trusted where it mattered. At one point, the older executive from earlier asked, "Do you require additional time before final sign-off?" Marcia looked at the documents in front of her, then at the city beyond the glass. "No," she said. "We proceed." There was strength in that answer, but also cost. Proceeding did not erase what had happened. It meant she would not allow violence to claim the work, too. The signatures began, a silent rhythm of consequence and completion. One by one, the approvals aligned. Funds were released, blocks were lifted, timing windows reopened. The frozen machine turned again, not chaotically, not dramatically, but with the calm efficiency that belongs to systems finally under the hands of the person who truly understands them. By evening, the merger was effectively secured. Kingston's business world erupted with speculation, admiration, gossip, fear, revisionism. Everyone now seemed to remember signs they had missed. Everyone suddenly had a theory about Marcia Bennett Clark. How long had she been running things? How did nobody know? Who else had she outmaneuvered? Had Daniel ever been real power at all? In some rooms, people laughed at him. In others, they avoided his name entirely, sensing the story had gone beyond embarrassment and into warning. Back at the house, Daniel sat alone in the dark. He had not turned on lights. The glow from the city leaked through the curtains in soft orange fragments. He no longer looked like a rising titan of finance. He looked like a man who had finally met the truth after spending years mistaking noise for strength. His phone rang again. This time it was his lawyer, then another lawyer, then a doctor's representative, then a board notice, then another alert. He answered some, ignored others. Nothing said to him restored a single piece of what he had lost, because the real loss was not the title, not the deal, not the public image. It was this. He had been given proximity to greatness and answered it with contempt. He had been loved by a powerful, disciplined woman and decided her quietness meant she could be diminished without consequence. He had stood inside a future larger than himself and tried to dominate the very person holding it together. And when the pressure finally broke him, his action exposed what his character had been preparing all along. Late that night, Marcia stood alone in her private office. The same office hidden inside the house where Daniel had passed the door countless times without ever asking what lived behind it. The screens were dim now. Most updates had gone quiet. The merger was closing. Counsel was in place. Security protocols were active. For the first time all day, there was space to feel. She rested both hands on the desk and let out a slow breath. Pain moved beneath the medication in stubborn waves. Her body remembered what her face refused to dramatize, but the deeper ache was older than injury. It was the ache of recognizing that hope had ended. Not the corporate hope, not the project, the personal one. The hope that Daniel might still become someone better before the evidence settled permanently in the other direction. She looked at a photograph in a drawer, not displayed, just kept. A younger version of them on a shoreline years ago. He was laughing. She was smiling with the openness of someone not yet forced to defend every inch of her own depth. She studied the photo for a moment, then closed the drawer. Love had been real. So had disappointment. So had harm. Truth did not need to simplify itself to become bearable. Her secure phone buzzed, a short message from the board chair. Congratulations. Kingston is talking. More importantly, the structure held. Rest if you can. Marcia set the phone down. Then she looked out through the narrow window toward the city lights and said, softly, not to anyone present but to herself, "It held because I did." And that was the truth of the whole story. Not that a man fell, though he did. Not only that a hidden CEO was revealed, though she was. Not only that a 10 billion merger survived scandal, though it did. The deeper truth was that a quiet woman everyone underestimated had carried more than anyone knew. Strategy, protection, discipline, patience, love, warning, risk, and finally judgment. Kingston would tell the story its own way now. Some would make it gossip. Some would make it legend. Some would reduce it to a twist. But the truth beneath all versions would remain unchanged. Daniel Clark lost everything the moment he mistook power for permission. And Marcia Bennett Clark rose fully into the light the moment she stopped hiding from people who had only ever respected what they could see. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, the last illusion had burned away. And somewhere in the silence after victory and ruin, one final truth settled like law. Never underestimate the person who can build an empire without needing applause. He thought he married a quiet woman, but Kingston would remember her as the force that built the deal, survived the fire, and ended his illusion forever. Just when Kingston thought the story was over, the real danger finally revealed itself, and this time, even she wasn't in control. Kingston was on fire. Not with flames, with information, with rumors, with shock. Every radio station, every news channel, every WhatsApp group, every office conversation, one name, Marcia Bennett Clark. She was the CEO all along. Man say she controlled DI whole deal. Then who was Daniel? Just a face. And just like that, a legend was born. But legends attract something dangerous. Attention. Inside a high-rise office overlooking Kingston Harbor, a group of men sat in silence. Not impressed, not shocked, not emotional, calculating. One of them leaned forward. So, she revealed herself. Another nodded slowly. Earlier than expected, a third man spoke quietly. That means the structure is exposed. Silence. Then the first man said something that shifted everything. Or it means she thinks she's untouchable. Across town, Marcia stood in a secured boardroom. The deal had closed. The signatures were complete. The power had shifted. But something wasn't right. She felt it. The same way she had always felt risk before it appeared. A disturbance. Not in the deal, in the environment around it. Her phone vibrated. A secure line. She answered. Yes. The voice on the other end was different this time. Not calm, not controlled, urgent. Ma'am, we have a situation. Her expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened instantly. What kind of situation? A pause. Then, they're moving. Silence. Marcia's eyes lowered slightly. Who? Another pause. Longer this time. The original investors. The ones you blocked out of the structure. That changed everything, because those were not normal investors. Those were the ones who didn't just lose money when deals changed. They took things back. Back at the house, Daniel sat in darkness. His phone lit his face, notifications still pouring in, but something new appeared. A message. Unknown sender. He hesitated, then opened it. You were never the target. His heart skipped. Another message. But now, you're part of the problem. Daniel sat up. Fully alert now, a third message came through. If you want to survive, you'll tell us everything about her. Across Kingston, vehicles began to move, unmarked, untracked, purposeful, not police, not government. Something else. Back in the boardroom, Marcia ended the call slowly. They've decided to act, she said. One of her advisors leaned forward. Do we contain it? She didn't answer immediately, for the first time in the entire story. There was uncertainty, not fear, but awareness. This was not a corporate threat. This was personal. Meanwhile, Daniel stood up from the sofa, his breathing heavier now. He looked toward the door, then back at the phone, then whispered, What did you get me into? Marcia. Outside. A car slowly rolled past the house, then another, watching, waiting. Back in the boardroom, Marcia finally spoke. No, she said. The room froze. We don't contain it. A pause. Then she added, We prepare for impact. And just like that, the story changed, because this was no longer about power, or control, or revenge. This was survival. She survived her husband, but the people coming next don't play by rules, and this time even her power would not be enough.
Kingston thought it done. Story finished. But real danger don't show itself early. It waits. City loud but no flames burn. Just truth spreading every turn. Every screen, every line. One name running through every mind. Marcia Bennett, she control it all. They say Daniel never stood tall. From shadow moves to open stage. Now she's standing center of the game. But power loud, draw eyes fast. and attention never pass. Prepare for impact. Something coming back, not the kind you fight with facts. This deeper than contracts. Prepare for impact. This ain't no attack, this the kind you don't see coming till it right behind your back. High rise, Kingston wide, miss it quiet, watching tide. No applause, no surprise, just calculation in their eyes. She revealed who someone say, or she thinks she's safe this way. Another lean voice real low, or she don't know what we know. Cause every move got unseen cost, and every win can still be lost. Prepare for impact. They don't play like that. These the ones who take it back. No warning, just react. Prepare for impact. System breaking cracks when the original hands step in. They don't negotiate, they act. She answers straight. Voice say, man, we running late. They're moving now. Silence fall, then truth get loud. Phone glow, light inside the dark. Message hit 'em like a spark. You were never the target, pause. But now you're part of it. Then you'll breathe, but chest feel tight. Everything shifting one night. Tell us what you know about her. Now his name inside the war. Outside cars roll so fast. Not police, not built to ask. Eyes watching every move. Now we got something to prove. Prepare for impact. Time to face the fact. This ain't headlines, this ain't hype. This where real danger at. Prepare for impact. No more stepping back. Once you in this level now, you don't ever go back. Courtroom silent, tension thick. Every second counting quick. Do we stop it? Someone say. Do we shut it down today? She stands still, then reply, no. We prepare for impact. We prepare, we prepare, we prepare. That one line changed the tone. It's no longer her alone. It's not business, not control. It's survival at its core. She be dead, she be lies, but this come in different size. Cause the ones now stepping in don't respect no rules. Prepare for impact. Everything collide. Power, secrets, truth, and pride. Nowhere left to hide. Prepare for impact. This the final phase when the hunters become the hunted and the strong start feeling weak. She survived what broke most souls. Built a power to control. But something older, something real. Don't care what you build, only what it can take this time. Power might not be enough.